Hello, everyone. Welcome to another episode of Sree's daily global COVID-19 show. My name is Sree Sreenivasan, and it's my honor to convene this daily conversation around all things COVID. On this show, we cover various aspects of the pandemic as well as the upcoming US elections. But those two things, the pandemic and the elections, mean that we often miss other important stories that are taking place. And so today we bring you once again news you missed. It's been a month since we had our last episode of News You Missed. So we're very grateful to all of you for joining us for this episode. We have our co-hosts back with us, Bob Anthony at New York Bob, veteran tech journalist, and Vandana Menon at Vandana_Menon, freelance journalist and co-producer of this show. We will be hearing from them as they show us important news items from around the world. And we'd love to hear from you. What are stories that we missed that you think we should know? So please share in the comments, put in the links, and we will try to show them. Thanks very much. You will meet Bob and Vandana in just a moment. Hi, everyone. I'm Sree. Thank you very much for being here. I'm the Marshall Loeb Visiting Professor of Digital Innovation at Stony Brook School of Journalism and the co-founder of Digimentors, a social, digital, and virtual events consulting company. Our motto, don't cancel your event without talking to us. We love geeking out about virtual events. We've done dozens and dozens every month since March, and we can help you make your event or make a talk show like this. We've done events with 50 people and events with 100,000 people. Your event is probably in between those two numbers, and we can help you. So please email me, sree@sree.net, and you can check out our website at digimentors.group. So thank you again for being here. We're live right now on Facebook, on Twitter, on YouTube, and on LinkedIn. And that means you can share this on any of those platforms. You can tag a friend and they can join us later and catch up if they're not watching so early. Why are we here at 9 a.m. on a Saturday? Especially when the three of us who are our speakers are not exactly early morning people, because we want to make sure we have a Saturday night off. And so we try to do our Saturday shows at 9 a.m. And so we want to just remind you, if you haven't seen the show in a while, we've been on the air for 225 days. We've had more than 386 guests from 68 cities and 20 countries. We're in partnership with Scroll Global and Scroll.in, and our archives are youtube.com/Sreenet. Please become a subscriber. And big thanks to our other producer, also Rose Horowitz at Rose Horowitz 31, and Vandana Menon, who you will meet in just a moment. All right, what are some stories you missed? Please tell us in the comments as I bring on Vandana and Bob. We're going to talk to us about various aspects of the crisis and what's going on and news in and around all that's going on. So let me welcome to the screen Bob and Vandana. Hi, folks.
Hello. Good morning.
Good morning. This is, both of you are not morning people, am I right?
Not by a long shot, no.
No. It takes me some time to get started in the morning.
One thing that I thought that maybe Bob is used to the morning is morning flight, so he gets up early. Instead, he told me, what does he do for really early morning flights?
Sleep.
I just stay up.
You just stay up.
I don't trust myself to get up to catch the flight.
I remembering flights is another thing, but I used to always worry about, those 4 a.m. alarms and missing them. And so maybe your way is better, Bob. But one of the things you said to me in March is that you're not going to travel till there's a vaccine. You told me you're not going to go to CES, the big consumer electronics show, before they have a vaccine and everything else. And sadly, CES has now turned all digital. And that just shows you, when you and I talked around March 17th, 18th, something like that, as we were looking ahead, and you planted the idea of news you missed because there was so much going on. There was a robbery and maybe it was even a murder in my subway station, and I didn't even know about it because of all the news going on. That's why we decided to do this show. So let's start first, Bob, and then each of you kind of catch us up. How are you doing? what's the latest in your kind of your own lives, and then we'll go to talking about the news.
Well,
Bob, go for it.
sure. I mean, it's been I've been trying to keep busy here. As you know, I'm a print journalist, and through this whole pandemic, I've been trying to pick up my video skills here and there, learning how to deal with lights and microphones and things like that. Things I really didn't have to worry about pre-March. But I've been getting around. I fortunately I keep getting calls from professional colleagues who check in on me, family and whatnot. So it's been a busy week. This is one of the weeks when I would have been going to a lot of New York tech events, and so I'm basically zoomed out.
I understand that feeling very much. You've also one of the blessings of this time is that we've gotten to work a lot more together, Bob. And you write a weekly a tech tip for my newsletter, which everyone can find at sreenet.substack.com. My newsletter used to be filled with tech things, and then as I got more and more mad with the pandemic about everything going on, it's been turned into news about the pandemic. So I asked Bob to kindly write a short tech tip every time. So let's just talk about this one that you wrote for us this week.
Yeah, I mean, we've been Google and Apple, they seem to hit the news easily as they introduce their products. But this one, the new Microsoft Surface Laptop Go, is somewhat under the radar. It's not at the top of the line of the Surface laptops or the Surface tablet / laptops. It's near the bottom, but it has just enough power to be a good work and school laptop. It starts at $549, but I agree with other tech folks that you don't go for that model. You go for the next one up. The bottom model is a little underpowered, but it's actually a very nice looking laptop for the times, for the age of Zoom, and so it's been under the radar, but it's a product it's the right product for the moment. We shouldn't be spending money at the moment, but this is good tech. It's a very good tech value for the dollar.
And just so people understand, this is good if you need a second computer also, or your child is using Zoom and you need a good computer for them. That's also. So what is the price we're roughly talking about here? $550 or
$550 for the bottom unit, but I don't recommend that because that's only 4 gigabytes of RAM. And you really need 8, which is the next model up, the $700 model. But at that level, you're doing just fine for Zoom, for word processing, for communications, not for gaming, not for heavy video editing, but a very good laptop, just the same.
Great. Well, thank you. And thank you, Bob, for being here and sharing the news we missed. You're going to tee up a couple of stories for us. Let's go to Vandana. How are you doing?
I'm fine. I'm like Bob, I'm busy. There's been so much news to cover, and I'm just trying to keep up with all of that. I've been helping you, Sree, with your class, and it's been so interesting seeing the show produced by your students, and that's been a great learning experience.
I think we've all been learning from that.
Yeah.
Vandana.
Yeah.
Tell us what's it like to be a journalist at this moment, especially a freelance journalist. It's a lot of hustle, right?
Yes, I find that it's taking up a lot of my energy. That you have to constantly come up with new ways to cover things that everybody is doing anyway, and then pitch them and hope that someone wants to commission your story. So it's been interesting, but it's also kind of forcing me to push my own boundaries and step out of my own comfort zone, and that's been challenging. But I guess now is as good a time as any to do that.
And you also, I think, in the last 2 months, moved to New York versus Philadelphia. Yes. How do you find New York City? You're going out a lot more in the city than I am. So talk about that a little bit, please.
Well, it's definitely not a ghost town, like President Trump said during the debate. I mean, I like the energy here. I find that everyone is out and about. I'm still trying to keep safe and limit my outdoor visits, but I have been enjoying some park time lately. I've been going every couple of afternoons to just go lounge around in the park, which has been nice. Moving during the pandemic was stressful, But I think a lot of people have been doing that, actually. There was a great story recently about people moving into New York City during the pandemic and what that meant for their careers and their dreams.
Yeah, I guess if you were planning to move,
Yeah.
rents have, I think, sort of
Rents have dropped.
yeah, rents have dropped a little bit too.
Yeah.
So we'll talk about so many different aspects of this, and there are many stories that people are queuing up. So folks, this is news you missed. Please post in the comments if you have a story you feel more people should be talking about. We will get to them as well. So Bob, you have a story about a company that made a big splash in its opening. It had big supporters, big tech all-stars involved, Hollywood all-stars involved, and then it went bust. So set that up for us and we'll show the story.
Sure. I'm sure we've heard a lot about Quibi. It was supposed to be a new streaming service, basically for the times that we're in, actually the pre-pandemic times that we would have been in. And it would have been a short-form video platform. Well, it was a short-form video platform meant for example, if you have a half an hour to kill at the doctor's office, or if you're commuting, or if you're you're between Zooms or things like that. And they had spent a lot of money to set this up. And Quibi was supposed to be the next big Twitter, or the next big Peacock, which is actually doing well for NBC. And it just didn't go. So let me see if I can share the one that share the story that I had queued up. In the space of 6 months, well, actually the headline and the story you have there works just perfect. They had raised 101.75 billion, and now it's a bust. There's not much else they can do with it. I don't know if they'll try to sell the content, but this is an obvious example of tech for consumers that weren't there. Another story that I had queued up talked about someone who was pitching Quibi. And he said that he walked into an extremely lavish office with a beautiful lobby and lots of expensive food sitting around. And that reminded me a lot of the early days of the internet, the late 90s, the 2000s, when venture capital was flooding into the internet, yet nobody had a business plan. And this reminds me so much of that, because I attended so many tech launches, lavish tech launches, which blew a lot of venture capital but had no business model in the end. And here we have a very expensive mistake, obviously, a product for a segment for consumers that were happy to stay where they are, with Netflix, with Hulu, with Peacock, with et cetera, et cetera.
And here we are. So that means also, there may be some people who, when these kinds of stories break, will talk about, oh, what a waste of money, and some comeuppance to these tech-rich people and everything. But there were employees who have lost their jobs, who quit other jobs to take this, took a chance on this company and the promises that they made. So I always point out that no matter how you feel about Quibi, there are real people whose lives and futures are at stake now because of, or at risk now because of this.
Yes, it reminds me of when a friend was in town, and it just so happened that he was in town the day that Lehman Brothers went bust. So as much as we could joke about the people who had screwed us in the housing crisis, et cetera, and how they mismanaged their business, there were real people walking out the door, and having their careers ended or disrupted badly. So you're right, the human factor here is there.
Yeah, and that's certainly something that I try to pay attention to. Let's move on to other stories. Vandana, you have something for us?
Mm-hmm. Yes, on a slightly happier note, I saw the story yesterday, which really amused me. It's met a Duncan, married a Duncan, and it's a story about Sugar Good and John Thompson, who got married at Dunkin' Donuts in Oklahoma. Sugar Good worked there at the drive-thru, and apparently he would drive by every morning at 7 a.m. and grab his cup of coffee, and they would talk. And one of my favorite lines in this story, let me just find it.
Well, while you're finding it, let me just point out that Sugar Good is this person's name, worked at Dunkin' Donuts, and they got married at what a story.
Yeah, it's a great story. And it's very sweet.
So to speak.
So to speak. No, I can't
There's
find
their pickup
it.
truck.
Yes, this is their pickup truck.
Yeah.
And they got married in the driveway, in the drive-thru, and she gave him her cell phone number after months of just talking. And the story has such wonderful details.
Yeah, I see. This is a really in April. Neither of them sure of the exact date. Was proposed in the Dunkin' parking lot while dropping her off at 3 a.m. for the start of her morning shift. She said an ecstatic yes. Setting the date took some time. Figuring out a place to get married did not. We knew we wanted to share it with the Dunkin' family. So there we go.
Yeah, and this is them getting married.
I know people are crazy about their coffee, so I imagine they had to shut down the drive-thru for that morning, and there must be people looking for coffee who would have to find another cup of coffee.
Yeah, they clinked coffee cups instead of champagne glasses.
Makes sense. Our story wasn't glamour, but it was true romance. Now, I think both of you are coffee drinkers. I am not. Some people say that Dunkin' Donuts coffee is actually pretty good, and some people say it's even better than Starbucks, which gets obviously a lot more publicity for its coffee. Where do you folks rank on coffee brands, and where do you folks come out? Vandana, you first.
Oh, I've heard the Dunkin' coffee is really good. That's what people have recommended to me. I personally haven't frequented Dunkin' enough to consume its coffee. I don't go to Starbucks as often because I feel like Starbucks is a bit overpriced. I mainly make my own coffee.
Okay.
That's what I do.
And Bob has a nice coffee cup this morning. He's going to show us.
Yes. I mean, I have my I Love New York cup this morning.
Wait, you got to hold that up. I got to put it on close. Yeah.
Let me aim it. Let me aim it.
There you go. Perfect. Hold on. I've got to get that picture. Perfect. Nice.
But I do miss Dunkin'. I'm not a big coffee drinker, but if you're going to get me on the air at 9 a.m., yes, I need my coffee. And I do miss Dunkin' Donuts. Dunkin' Donuts coffee. They actually do make a good pot, and that's where I would stop, say, between press events if I needed something to keep me going during the day. I definitely have the Dunkin' Donuts app on my phone, and I keep it handy because I don't want to miss my freebie after every X amount of cups.
So you, Bob, as someone who has been in New York for many years, you've seen the rise of this kind of the gourmet coffee. Otherwise, I remember when I was growing up here, I never drank coffee, but there was no Starbucks. There were no these very expensive coffee places. You used to go get coffee in those Greek paper cups, right, with the Greek insignia on it, or faux Greek insignia on it. That really kind of changed the way people consume coffee in New York, didn't it? And I guess around the world.
Mm-hmm.
It did. I mean, I'm dating myself, but there was the old chock full of nuts, which had the counter. And so you would sit at the counter. It wasn't the Starbucks experience. It was much more Spartan than that. But it was good coffee, and you can sit down, get coffee, get a donut, get out. And that was the experience. But yeah, the quintessential Greek labeled, there we go, New York coffee cup. You see all over the place at the outdoor trucks and at the corner diners, at the bodega especially, you'll get coffee in that cup. And just looking at the cup reminds me of the number of times I've burnt my fingers because the coffee was too hot. Because it seems like they almost are, but yeah, that's definitely a New York experience. Those cups. One of the reasons. Yeah, go ahead, Vandana.
Yeah, I've never seen those cups. I was just gonna say.
Oh, you've never seen it, and you've been in New York for a little bit, but not because that culture is gone that we used to be about those cups. One of the reasons we do the story, the segment, is so that we can pay attention to some stories we missed, and then also to understand some trends and things that are happening. But since we're talking about coffee, we should mention that there's a famous story about the woman who spilled coffee on herself at McDonald's and then sued McDonald's. And that first, it seemed like a story all about, look at how litigious America is and frivolous lawsuits. But there was a Netflix documentary about this that showed the burns that she had on her lap. She was an older woman. I remember, if you haven't seen this, it's quite an amazing look, kind of a behind the scenes of what happens in a story that the headline grabs you, but the real story might be something else. And she had, third-degree burns on her inner thigh. It was like horrifying photographs. I don't know, Bob, if you saw that documentary or remember that story.
I didn't see the documentary. Definitely remember the story. Remember joking about it to my journalist colleagues, and just assumed that it would get thrown out of court. It was one of those stories that was packaged that way. This is the freaky story of the day. Woman sues over spilled cup of McDonald's coffee. But yeah, she got a heck of a judgment out of it. And
and this is the story. I'll just show it. So anyone who's interested in learning more, this is this is the McDonald's hot coffee case, in which the 79-year-old got $3 million in punitive damages for the burn she suffered. Typical reaction isn't coffee supposed to be hot? And McDonald's didn't pour the coffee on her. She spilled it on herself. Besides, she was driving the car and wasn't paying attention. Now you can read the whole story and understand what happened there. And it changed the way in which people look at some of these lawsuits as well. And I will have a McDonald's story at the end of the show for us to talk about as well. So let's go now. Who has a story now? Bob, do you have one for us?
Yeah, unfortunately, it's gonna bring us down a bit. I'll try to share the screen as I cue it up over here. It's especially in this moment now of Black Lives Matter and violence against people of color. There was the Tulsa massacre that's going back to the 20s, where there was a very vibrant Black business community in Tulsa. And there was an incident, and it erupted into mob violence, which burned the community of Greenwood, as I find it here on my computer. And here we go, coming up really quickly. If I could, here we go. And let's see if I did that right.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Yep, and here we go. I'll add it to the screen. Yeah.
And let me scroll down at least to the headline, if I get it right. But basically, it doesn't seem to be working. That's not the one I wanted to queue up. I'll try this again later. But there was basically mob violence in Tulsa. And what they did was they burned down the entire community of Greenwood, killed maybe 300 people. And basically there was a famous old photo that said, had a picture of the city, and it said driving the Negro out of town, and you could see the smoke rising in the distance. This week, apparently, or maybe early last week, scientists found what might be a mass grave, because actually nobody was arrested for the mob violence, for the number of people. There was so many people murdered and injured, but nobody was ever prosecuted, arrested, or anything, and people disappeared, and their families never knew where they went. They just knew that they were buried somewhere. And after some local activists in Tulsa raised hue and cry over the last few decades, finally, it looks like they've located some bodies in Tulsa that relate to this, massive blot on the in American history. A very sad story, obviously, a very timely story, but it's one that would have gotten a lot more notice in any other year if it had come up. So sorry to bring down the mood of the show, but it's quite the important story that really didn't get that much play.
I thank you for bringing up that story. It is really important. We had done a story about Oklahoma in our 86th episode, and it's hard to imagine now we're at the 228th episode. So back in on June 5th, we did an episode that so people can go back on our in my YouTube archives, and we did a show on financial equality and inequality in America, and our guest was Shomari Wills. Sho Wills, a former student of mine, who wrote a book about Black Wall Street and what happened among many incidents, what happened in Oklahoma, and it was such a moving story to hear about. Of course, we then learned that for Juneteenth, just a couple of weeks later, that the president decided to have his first big rally there, and pretended he didn't know anything about what happened on Wall Street, on Black Wall Street in Tulsa. And side note, that's the event at which Herman Cain went without a mask, the former Republican candidate for president, the candidate for president, and then he got COVID and he died. And all of this is kind of tied together, and it's really, really sad. So what is going to happen here with this research, do you think, Bob? How will this help us get more attention to the Tulsa massacre?
Well, besides just bringing it to the fore once again and reminding us that this did happen in this country, it'll bring at least a minor level of closure to the families. They're going to do their best to identify who's who and what's what. But as you can imagine, there's not much left of what was buried, and that's sort of one of the things they need to figure out. It's not one of these digs where you can just go in there and see what's there. There's a certain level of dignity involved, since these are families that are still there and people that they might be able to trace back to. So they're trying to go slow. They're trying to be dignified. It's not an easy thing to do and maintain a level of calmness and dignity.
Thank you. Let's take a look at some of the comments that have been coming in. Linda's watching from Long Island, and Mark is watching, Mark Lee, a friend in Durham, North Carolina. He's watching in the morning, and he had one of our guests from our show on his podcast, Damon Brown. He was amazing. And Mark says there's talk that over 50% of minority businesses might go under, and some think it could be much higher. So I'm not sure what exact location he's talking about, but the fact that minority businesses and business owners always have more difficulty surviving anyway, all of this just puts more pressure on those situations. And Mark says the Chinese Lantern Festival has canceled their North Carolina show, not going virtual, but going to cities where the restrictions are not so tight. And Ireland is under a second lockdown. How many world cities do you think will follow suit? And so he's helping share story ideas and stories we missed. I think that one of our Digimentors colleagues, Zach Peterson, who edits Bob the tech column for our newsletter, he was in the Czech Republic, and he talked about how well the Czech Republic did through March, April, May, June, and then now suddenly they're in a second lockdown where you can't even go out unless it's for emergencies. And the reason for that, because they opened up too fast. And we've seen this in so many places. You both remember how California did so well at the beginning. They were the first to lock down under Mayor London Breed of San Francisco. And then they were the conservatives in Orange County put so much pressure on the governor that they started opening up, and now California is in bad shape. What does Bob think of Google and its corporate battle that's in court? And would those impact those of us that use YouTube? So there are often multiple Google cases, so you'll know which one perhaps he's talking about, or maybe there's more than one that he and you are thinking about, Bob.
Well, I mean, Google's under pressure from the federal government right now because of the way that it manages its search engine, its advertising engine, in making agreements with manufacturers to direct their browsers and searches to what Google provides. And so there's a big monopoly concern, sort of like the old days of the robber barons and the oil companies and the phone companies. So Google has a bit to worry about for the moment, and so does Facebook and the other big tech companies, because especially this, at least for this administration, don't know how Biden, let's hope it happens. I don't know how a Biden administration would handle it.
And one of the lies that have been perpetuated by the right is that Facebook and Twitter and other tech platforms are anti-right, anti-conservative, when every single study of every platform shows that the top stories that get the most engagement, most viewership, most reach are from the right. And so people like Donald Trump, but others are dominating the lists of the most viewed content online. So, but it's a great talking point and a great rallying cry by crying that people are fighting you. And in sports, in American sports, we call it working the refs. By constantly saying that the referee is against you, then maybe you get a little extra help from the referee when you need it. And that's sort of what we are seeing here as well. Let's look at who else is up early. Pradnya says good morning from Silver Spring, Maryland. And Pradnya is a good friend of this show. Rose Horowitz, our other producer, is watching and tweeting away. Please follow her, Rose Horowitz 31. And Rick says a hype bubble busts. He's talking about the Quibi story. Yes. And Mark says Ron Thomas is always talking about the need for a business plan and how amazed he is that folks don't have this when launching a business. And Ron Thomas, another friend of our show and of our New York Times read along, is a great expert at business and corporate strategy. And so he lives in Dubai, by the way. And Diana is watching from San Francisco, where it's 6 a.m, and she was our guest on our 6-month anniversary show, Positivity Show. She gave us a lot of positivity that night.
She baked us a cake. Sorry. She baked us a cake.
That's right. And look, Diana says, never had a cup of coffee in my life, never tried it. That is pretty amazing. I am not a coffee drinker, as I've said multiple times, but I've certainly drank my share of coffee, and I love iced coffee. Especially my grandma used to make iced coffee, and I loved it in India. Vandana, your family is in India. How are things going in Hyderabad, where they are, and elsewhere?
So actually, there were floods in Hyderabad quite recently, and there have been all kinds of videos and pictures that have been shared. But there was incessant rains, terrible flooding. In fact, there's this one viral video in which a road was so flooded that it moved a parked car, and the car kind of slipped onto another car. That's the best way to put it. And it was hundreds of people, their homes are flooded, electricity outages across the city. And this is at a time when COVID cases are rising still. And it's just an absolutely terrible tragedy. I think 81 people died. And there's so many people who are left homeless. So my family is safe. They're fine. They had issues with electricity, but besides that, nothing major. Our domestic help, her house was flooded, and thankfully now everything is okay. But it was just not the best timing. It's in a year of tragedies. It was yet another difficult thing to have to go through.
And so sad. What is the outlook in terms of how you now had a chance to see two governments at work? What India is doing, what America is doing. What is your take?
My take is that I think there needs to be less federal. I mean, at least in India, I feel like the center took a lot of decisions when those decisions should have been taken by the states, shutting down all of these all state borders and creating that led to the migrant worker exodus. That was a really bad idea. So there should have been the states should have been issuing those rules. In the US, I feel like there's been more state action, but not enough words of caution. So at least the center in India is being strong about the danger of COVID, but the cases are still rising. They've ramped up testing, which is good, but I'm quite worried. I feel like while the US is going to experience a second wave, India is experiencing the first wave for the first time properly. And I'm quite nervous about it.
Yeah.
Vandana, a quick question for you. At least are the citizens there getting a single message? Because, here it's always a conflict depending on who you're listening to. If you listen to Trump or you listen to the science, it's, night and day the message. Is it at least a single message?
Well, yes, because Prime Minister Modi isn't contradicting the science. That he himself hasn't said anything. There have been local politicians who've said inaccurate things, but at least there's some focus on the science. I just don't think there's enough. There are enough PSAs being put out. People are going back to normal because India is just they need to function. It's a massive country with so many people who just went through so much panic in a very short span of time and are now returning to normal or trying to return to normal because they have to. And it's just being I don't think it's being managed very well, but there is a single message coming across, I think. I'm not there present. Also, Indian media is complicated. So they are kind of so what's happening in India actually is a lot of deflection. So they aren't necessarily focusing on COVID, but there's a lot of other things occupying the news cycle. Lots of stories on Bollywood nepotism, for example, is what's occupying media headlines instead of the danger of COVID. But there is agreement on the science, essentially. Yeah,
that's so important. We don't have that here, Bob, and we're paying the price for it. Look at this story. Trump's behavior in America led to the death of this poor man in India who was super fan. He worshipped, or not worshipped, but he would pray at a 6-foot statue of Donald Trump in India that he helped build, and then he decided to fast. So again, this headline is not quite correct. He went on a fast for Donald.
Yeah, he went on a fast. He was fasting for President Trump's well-being. I actually wanted to talk about this because Trump has a huge following, and he has a lot of support amongst the Hindu right in India. And they are big fans, as you can see. This man went on a fast to pray for Trump's well-being and ended up dying. President Trump is fine. But it's and the reason I wanted to bring this up is in the context of the last debate in which Trump called India, Russia, and I think China filthy, and he said India was filthy, and that's caused a lot of outrage, social media outrage. And it's interesting because some members of the Hindu right are, because it's Trump saying it, are like, yeah, well, yes, India is filthy. So he's got a point, but he's kind of affecting that. And in the context of that, actually, Sree, I wanted to share another story. I've been kind of covering the Indian American community and how they will be voting in the elections, and the community in general has kind of shifted. A larger portion have shifted towards Trump, which in itself is an interesting phenomenon because they've been so staunchly liberal and democratic. But one of the things that at least we've been kind of assuming will be a major issue is visas and H-1B visas, and how the Trump administration's take on these immigration visas will likely affect immigrant communities. But honestly, according to a couple of surveys, it's not a priority for many immigrant. Foreign policy isn't necessarily as high up as bread and butter issues, like obviously as health and the economy. But there were a couple of changes recently to the H-1B visa, which is the temporary workers visa, which is what many Indians come into the US on. And I just wanted to show this.
But you're saying that's not what moves the needle. What moves the needle is the basics, the
Yes.
the
Yes.
basic economies, the basic human
Yes.
needs, as opposed to that being the campaign
Yes.
issue.
So actually, in the survey I'm referring to is a survey. There was one survey conducted by Indiaspora in collaboration with AAPI, and then there was another survey recently released by Carnegie, UPenn, and Johns Hopkins, I think. And they talked about how most people, the voter issues of that the voters are concerned about are race, issues of race in America, health, the economy, and which makes sense, I think. But this, especially because the people affected by this visa aren't voters, they're foreign nationals who are here on temporary work visas, which is what the H-1B is. But the Trump administration has been systematically kind of chipping away at the visa over the last couple of years, and their latest attack, so to speak, is to hike the minimum pay for medical professionals by 40%. So there's a income minimum requirement. You need to be earning, I think, above $60,000 a year to be to get the visa, essentially. And now they've raised it by almost 50%, which means that fewer hospitals will be willing to sponsor doctors from abroad in the middle of a pandemic, which I thought should definitely get more attention.
Thanks.
Right. If those of us familiar with the Javits building downtown, where you get your visas and where you a lot of the immigration issues are taken care of, that building has turned into a circus. I mean, if it's not this issue, it's another. And between the lines and it's a pandemic, so there are people missing. It's not as efficient. Never was efficient, and it breaks my heart to see more shenanigans like that.
Folks, we have lots of comments coming in, and we just catch up on some of them. Miriam Berkeley is saying hello. She says Chock full of nuts was great, and they had a good jingle. I'll ask Bob to sing it if he feels like it.
No, I haven't had that much coffee. No, I do remember it though.
And Susan says, I go to Starbucks for my Americano with heavy cream. Best coffee is Cuban coffee I used to get in Miami. Mark says, locally coffee shops are amazing. Here in Durham, we have BU Coffee and Cocoa Cinnamon, to name a few. And we have some local coffee brands as well. And Susan's saying everyone needs to watch that McDonald's documentary that we were talking about before. There is a movie about what happened in Wilmington where Black businesses were destroyed in what was a vibrant community. It was in the late 1800s, if memory serves me well. Just so sad to hear that this is happening. We have Funny Comedian says, what are your thoughts about India-USA 2+2 dialogue coming on? Do you think POTUS made a mistake by using inappropriate language and the social media outrage? So you talked about this a little bit, but what does this mean in terms of the overall kind of US-India relations? What is happening with Biden versus Trump after the election, do you think, with India?
Well, Trump and Prime Minister Modi have they have a good relationship, and they have great optics. And so I think that's what's being played up a lot, the fact that they have this good relationship. But then in actuality, like we were just talking about, the Trump administration's policy doesn't actually help India. Like the H-1B visa affects so many Indians. On the flip side, Biden, and more than Biden, Kamala Harris has actually made very strong comments opposing Prime Minister Modi and some of his Citizenship Amendment Act and the situation in Kashmir. And so the Hindu right isn't very fond of Kamala Harris or Joe Biden. So I'm curious to see, like, we'll have to see how the cookie crumbles. It depends on who wins. It depends on what they're proposing. But right now, I think everyone is kind of caught up in right-wing nationalism, both in the US and in India.
Yeah, that's for sure. Let's look at a few more comments, and then we'll get one more story from Bob after this. Miriam says, I think the Tulsa search for graves may have gained impetus from the publicity the massacre received on the streaming TV show Watchmen. I've not seen that, but I've heard that it's somehow centered, or part of it is centered in Tulsa. And just looking here more, Julia is watching from Burtonsville, Maryland, a stone's throw away from Silver Spring, where one of our other guests is. And Julia is at the AP and a wonderful social media person. And she and Vandana work on a terrific show that runs every single Sunday called She's on Call. And it'll be great to have everyone watch on Sunday morning at 11 a.m. Eastern. Please join us at She's on Call on Facebook, Twitter, and YouTube. And there's so many other comments coming in. We got a heart from Anuj, another heart, and a smiley face. That's good. Barbara is watching from Benin in West Africa. Wonderful to follow the show for the first time. Thank you very much, Barbara. And I believe this is our first viewer from Benin who has at least commented in the time that we've done this. And one of the sad things is that with everything going on in Africa, there's not enough attention. Africa is a continent that barely is in the news in regular times, and during the pandemic, we hear even less about it. There is a thriving tech scene in various parts of Africa, including Nigeria and South Africa and Kenya, where my friend Andrew Lee and I and our families got to go just 2 years ago, and we're just so impressed by everything we saw there. But Bob, you can tell us that we see so little tech news out of Africa, don't we?
I mean, it's funny to consider this an advantage, but in Africa, the lack of old technology and old infrastructure is often a good thing, because there's nothing, you're not ripping anything up to put in something new. So when new technology, new wireless, new carrier technologies come around, it's relatively easier to implement it, because it's not a transition. It's brand new stuff. But yeah, there is a lot of unseen tech news coming out of Africa, various nations, and I get to see a little of it, but I have to hunt.
Yeah, I know what you mean. All right, I did want to mention one story that we won't have time to show, but the Pope basically endorsing civil unions. As we know, the Catholic Church has been very critical of homosexuality, and the fact that he has said that civil unions, not full marriage equality, that's a big first step. And I know that there are conservative Catholics who have disliked this particular very relatively liberal Pope, and so they have gotten even more angry, the conservatives, because of his statement. So Bob, let's go with a story that you wanted to share.
Well, I guess I'll pick out a tech story. Like I said, let's see if I can do this correctly this time. But I was at a number of tech events, virtual tech events this week. And the funny thing about them is that they're sort of a great equalizer. Well, if you go to a real tech event, you can end up, there we go, you can end up visiting the larger booths, like the ones from Google, or well, Microsoft really doesn't pay for booths anymore. And then the little companies will be in the corner or whatnot. But when you're in a virtual event, they're sort of on the same plane. Excuse me. And I happened to see this one, and it's just a small company named Ampere. And if you click on the little arrows to the side of the image, it'll change. Not only is this a phone sanitizer, let me see if I can do that myself. If I get to the right window, here we go. Yeah, did I do that right?
You did. You did.
I
yeah.
did. What do you know? Wow.
Yeah.
Old guy like me got it right. If you see if I could increase the size a little. Well, I won't
We
even
can
bother
see it.
with that.
Yeah, go ahead. Go ahead.
But you can see it expands, and then it becomes a phone sanitizer. But it's not just a phone sanitizer. It's also a wireless charger. You put your phone on top of it, and you can charge your phone on top if it's compatible with wireless charging, and you can watch a video on it because it angles while it charges, and you could also use it to sanitize things like earbuds, chargers, styli, and whatnot. And it collapses down into the original form factor, as you see here, which isn't that much larger than the phone itself. So I thought, little gadget like this is an example. Not that this is that fantastic a piece of technology, but so many companies are coming out with sanitizing devices, or this obviously comes in multiple colors. Sanitizing devices like cases from Spec and from other companies that are antimicrobial, not necessarily antivirus. They're definitely not antivirus, antibacterial, and things like that. So it's
That's
actually
a fun story, Bob. Yeah, that's
Yeah.
a fun item.
it's actually easier for me to find these little companies because I don't have to walk to the back of the room. They have as equal a platform as anybody else in the event.
That's great to know. I have not actually looked into this UV sanitizer business yet, but I know that a lot of companies do that, including hotels and others. And by the way, Bob, you get credit for the first use of the plural of stylus that I've ever heard. Styli. I've not heard anybody say it out loud, and so you're the first person.
I'm a copy editor. I apologize for that.
And Mark says, have you been following the Nigerian news where there's a conflict with the Nigerian police and citizens? I heard about it through a Nigerian journalist and then NPR. I think there are three big freedom protests going on in Belarus, in Thailand, where they're, for the first time, saying things critical of the monarchy, which they have laws against that, and in Nigeria as well. So Mark, thank you for reminding us of that. And Funny Comedian says 700 plus economists wrote an open letter rejecting Trump, and for all the good that may do, it's also so many former Trump officials who have now come out against Trump. One thing, there was a really important story that the one Republican who could have an impact on this race and could speak up against Trump has not spoken up. Do you two know who that is?
Are we talking about Mitt?
No, Mitt said he didn't vote for. He didn't say who he voted for. He didn't vote for Biden, but he did not vote for Trump, is what he said.
Okay.
So it isn't him. It is George W. Bush. He is keeping quiet, even though last time I think he said some things. This time, when he could make a difference, he is not speaking up. Jonathan Borstein is watching from the East Village. What news that you missed did I miss, is what he says. And look at his Day of the Dead incarnation as you see it there. Many more comments coming in, and Miriam says it has also occurred to me in terms of the McDonald's scalding incident that if a customer's coffee was so hot, it's unlikely that workers may have been scalded because they're dealing with these hot liquids on a regular basis. So that's interesting. And then Mark says, I went to a virtual reality meetup virtually last night. It was fascinating to see some of the things that communities are doing. I learned about AllSpace, which is a free VR download. And that's true, Bob. A lot of technology that would have taken more time to become more popular. The pandemic has been a forcing mechanism. When I was chief digital officer of Columbia, I predicted boldly that it will take till 2025 before the majority of professors at a place like Columbia would voluntarily teach fully online courses. Of course, it didn't take till 2025. It took till March 14th, right? When suddenly everybody had 2 days to go online. And so technology can be a barrier, but it can also, because of the pandemic and other reasons, kind of be a forcing mechanism, though we saw Quibi fail in part because of the pandemic too. Vandana, do you have another story? We can start wrapping up here.
Yeah. I do have one more story. Continuing on our revolutionary note, there was also a major victory in Bolivia, but that's not the story I wanted to talk about. So Me Too is kind of picking up in Iran, and some of the details of this are shocking. There's a bookshop owner who confessed to raping over 300 women, and 30 of them have filed complaints. There's a really popular artist, Aiden Agdashlu, who has harassed and abused women for 30 years, and so many people have been reaching out and calling people out, and in a country like Iran, it's it's a signal that their time is up, so to speak.
Wow, that's a big story, and the story out of Bolivia too.
The story out of Bolivia too. Sorry, do you want to go ahead?
No, that's unfortunately, caught up as I am in the American politics, all I saw was the headline. So this is one of the things that happens. I love doing this episode. We do this, once a month or every couple of months. I learn so much of so many things that I have missed in the past. As we wrap up here, I go ahead.
Yeah, I actually have a question for Bob related to the Bolivia story. So one of the reasons, it's amazing, Evo Morales' party has come back to power, and what they've, after basically retaking power, his indigenous party took back power from a right-wing dictator who was kind of installed by a US-backed operation last year. But the reason why so many people, especially Elon Musk's Tesla, for example, and other tech companies have an interest in Bolivia is because it has huge lithium reserves. And what Morales' party is planning on doing now is nationalizing the lithium reserves so that the people can benefit from it. I just wanted to get your take on what that will actually mean for tech, because I don't know the importance of lithium.
I mean, it's an absolutely essential part of most, cell phone batteries and other elements in the cell phone universe. And lithium itself, I saw another story about children involved in basically mining the minerals that are necessary for producing lithium. And they were being paid pennies, and the mere fact that children were being used for the process was stomach churning. But nationalizing lithium production, I guess, spreads the idea is to spread the wealth to all, and I can see the importance. And look at Tesla, look at what Ford, the new electric Hummer that's been advertised during the World Series. So between this country and other countries, lithium type chemistry batteries are going to be big, and whoever has it is going to profit a lot. So that's very interesting. I had not heard that he was trying to nationalize that.
Yeah, that's what his plan is. I'm curious to see how this plays out for tech. I hope the Bolivian people actually benefit from it, and I hope they stop employing children. I did not know that. So.
Right. I echo what you just said. Yes.
I just wanted to, speaking of precious metals and earth and what happens with resources. Here's an unusual story. I don't know if you folks saw this. There's a town in Canada named Asbestos, and it has voted to detoxify its name. And so now it has a different name that basically it talks about the Valley of the Springs is the new name of this town in Quebec, which used to be called Asbestos. And there were people in the town who fought the name change because the old timers loved the name, and they have pride that the asbestos mines there made it possible for them to have the lives that they lived. Of course, asbestos is one of the biggest carcinogens and most dangerous materials in the world. But in countries all over the world, including in India, I remember people would advertise that they had asbestos roofing because it prevents fire and things like that. And that's what you're looking at, is a asbestos mine, which has obviously been dug so deep, but now there's blue water there instead of the asbestos itself. And this was the world's largest former asbestos mines, or one of the world's largest former asbestos mines. A great story, Marie Fazio's story. And the new name of the town is Valley of the Springs is the name. And so things change for the positive over time, and that's what you have to hope happens. I did promise another McDonald's story, and so we will take a look at that. Turns out that someone has built a website called McBroken, which will tell you the very important information whether your local McDonald's ice cream machine is broken or not. And first of all, I didn't know the McDonald's ice cream, the McFlurry, is that good that people care this much about it. But here you can see, so in Houston, 11% of the machines are broken, etc., as you can see here. But just look at the number of McDonald's just by seeing the dots. It's pretty amazing to see that. Bob, are you a connoisseur of McDonald's in any shape or form?
Well, I'll definitely grab a vanilla cone on the way back from Coney Island. It's inexpensive, and by the time I get to the subway, it'll be gone. So I do like their ice cream. But you know what this reminds me of? The very, very early days of the internet, where there was this webcam set up, one of the very first ones, and it was aimed at a coffee pot somewhere in Europe. And the world could keep track of whether there was coffee in this coffee pot. And we're talking about, 2000 and whatnot. And apparently our tech has evolved to the point where we can track ice cream at McDonald's anywhere in the metropolitan area. That definitely warms my heart.
That's hilarious. I do want to give a shout out. Today is October 24th. It's my 50th birthday coming up in 4 days, and we were going to have a huge party. My wife Rupa planned all of this weekend rather than next weekend, because the weekend before where after my birthday is the weekend before the election, and so we figured people should be out there canvassing or doing phone banking. And so that's why. So she planned all of this stuff this was going to be the birthday weekend. And then we figured the weekend after the election, people would be either too stunned or not in any shape to celebrate my birthday. But I do want to point out that it's also, today is actually my wife and my wedding anniversary. And I am going to show you a picture of our wedding day in Washington, D.C. And as you can see, if those of you who know Rupa, she's on Twitter at Rupa Online. She looks the same. I look a little different. I had hair then. Bob knew me when I had hair. Vandana did not. But that's what I used to look like at one point. And I just want to say to Rupa and to our kids, just thank you so much for letting me do these episodes. And I think a lot of us who are very busy with Zoom calls and things, we have people in our lives, if we live with other people, who allow us to do all of these things. And so I'm very grateful to Rupa, and happy anniversary. And I thought some of you would be amused to see this picture.
Nothing like the
happy
smile.
Anniversary.
Yes, nothing better than the smile of people looking ahead, especially before they have kids.
Yeah, exactly. That was 21 years ago, and so with that, I'm going to give each of you a final thought for now, and what you're looking forward to looking at over the next, 10 days before the election, something like that. So, Bob, you want to get us started?
I like what Vandana said earlier about adjusting to the current and learning how to hustle, and just picking up things, learning how to do things quickly and being agile, and just keeping busy. And thanks to you and other people, I've definitely been that for the last week. So that's what I'm looking forward to: a busy week of actual product reviews and new technology previews and whatnot. So actually, it's looking good. And no matter what happens, if I have to drop it in a box, go into a hall, or mail it in, going to make sure that vote gets in.
That's right. Very important. Mark says apparently the McBroken app was designed by a 24-year-old. Power to the millennials of the world from this middle-aged man. And let's see some other comments coming in here. Miriam says, as soon as your show is over, I'll run over. I'll go over to turn in my absentee ballot at the polling station. Well done. And think about the birth certificates. They will have to be changed. McDonald's ice cream is cheap, and they advertise it as only 200 calories. It's not bad tasting. So there you go. And Miriam says, thank you. One half of that couple is still gorgeous, but not the other. All right, Vandana, over to you.
I was just thinking, a couple of weeks ago, I went to the McDonald's near my house, and I suffered the crushing disappointment of realizing it was closed. So I could use the McBroken app. That would be helpful. But yeah, I'm looking forward to just seeing what happens. I'm all constantly aware that we're living through history. So I'm just, let's see where the next couple of weeks takes us. And next time we check back in, we have so much more to talk about.
Yes, we will. And in the meantime, thank you very much, everyone, for being here, for supporting us and being part of all we do online. I want to tell everybody that our friend Stefan Kaplan has his show that's started right now, so you can go over and support it. It's at the Spin Social Hour, and his guest is Stuart Dryden from Calgary in Canada. We were just talking about Canada, Stu Photo 8. So you can find him at Spin Social, and check that out, please. And these are busy days for us here at our show. On weekends, we do a lot at Digimentors, including our show where we talk about, we have the WBAI show at noon to 2 Eastern. My very first guest was Bob Anthony 28 episodes ago. And today we have Jan Lehigh with us, who is going to talk about the election. She's a professor at American University. And Jerry Vadamala is with the Asian American Legal Defense Fund and is going to talk about the elections as well. So that's a 2-hour live call-in show. Please join us for that. And then tomorrow morning, we will have on the New York Times Sunday Read Along, we will have with us Amy Padnani. Amy is a editor at the New York Times obituary section, and she created Overlooked, the amazing New York Times obituary series where they go back in time and do obits of women and people of color and others who the New York Times did not cover from 1851 to today. And that was her concept. And so she'll be with us 8:30 a.m. Eastern time on Sunday for the New York Times Read Along. It marks the five-year anniversary of the Read Along. And so we're just very grateful to all of you for joining us. So thank you very much. And if you haven't signed up for our alerts when we are online, just hold up your camera. There's a QR code that will bring you information when we are live on camera. I want to bring Bob and Vandana back just to say, Bob, that QR codes were not something that Americans really got into, but now you go to most restaurants, they'll, instead of giving you a menu, they'll give you a QR code so that you can then scan the code and that contactless. So that's something I had thought QR codes were a failure in America, but I think we have seen the value of them at this time.
Agreed. You can even walk up to a food truck now and scan the QR code and pay them that way. So yeah, I had the same thoughts. I thought they were dead, but nope.
And that's why we can't predict. And that's why even tech pundits like you and me can get it wrong, because we can't always tell how consumers are going to choose and what they're going to choose. Of course, the famous example is that Betamax was a better technology than VHS, but VHS won. We don't want to put Vandana on the spot, but I presume she doesn't know Betamax, but she knows VHS tapes, and then they got disappeared in her lifetime as DVDs took over.
Yeah.
Right. Let's just see some more quick comments. Deepthi says, happy anniversary. Miriam says, thank you. He said that he checked apparently a machine that he was checking in Durham. And then he also says, congrats and great. Thank you very much, everybody. We'll see you soon. And thank you, Bob. Everyone follow @NewYorkBob on Twitter, and Vandana Menon is Vandana_Menon. So let's all say goodbye, everyone.